Welcome to aehelp.com's IELTS test preparation videos. In this lesson, we will read a passage and then answer some tricky yes-no not given questions. I will show you strategies that are effective to get these answers correct and get a higher band score. Again, we have partnered with Skillshare, a world-class platform that lets you choose from hundreds of skills taught by professionals. Sign up for Skillshare today with this code to get your first 2 months for free. I'm currently using Skillshare to master photography and videography, and I'm loving it so far. Whether you're learning grammar, computers, or reading for your next IELTS exam, Skillshare is the right place to start. Try it today. Now watch and learn. First off, let's read this passage together. You should never read true-false not given questions or yes-no not given questions before the passage, simply because there are false and not given statements which will confuse you. Again, your mind will not be able to separate whether you read the information in the passage or in the questions. So leave these types of questions until after you've read the passage. Remember, to get those high band scores, 7 or more, you do need to read the passage. And you have about 10 minutes to do so. So let's read the passage together now.
Painting the Sistine Chapel. The Sistine Chapel, named after Pope Sixtus IV, whom directed its construction, is one of the most important sites in all of Roman Catholicism. Located within the Vatican, the seat of papal power, the Sistine Chapel has been home to the papal conclave, the process of electing a new pope, since its completion in 1480. It wasn't until 1508, however, that the ceiling of the chapel took on its famous frescoes from the hand of Michelangelo. Until his work on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo had primarily been a sculptor. In fact, he was hesitant to begin work on the project due to his lack of experience with frescoes, the name given to a painting on a wall or ceiling, usually watercolour paint on fresh plaster. The Pope was adamant, however, and in the spring of 1508, Michelangelo began the work. The first problem with painting the Sistine Chapel's ceiling was its extraordinary height. Reaching almost 70 feet above the chapel's surface, the ceiling would be incredibly difficult to access. To reach it, Michelangelo devised a series of scaffolds that attached to holes in the walls of the chapel. To this day, there are still unpainted areas of the chapel corresponding to the points at which the scaffolding attached to the walls. Unlike Hollywood portrayals, Michelangelo did not paint the ceiling whilst on his back. Instead, he painted in an upright position. This resulted in rather extreme neck soreness from constantly working with his neck craned into an uncomfortable position. Michelangelo even wrote a poem detailing the difficulties he encountered. It is a testament to the physical prowess and mental fortitude of Michelangelo that he was able to complete the project. 4 years of physical and mental anguish must have been truly unbearable. Painting frescoes is a labour-intensive task. Because the plaster must be fresh, this necessitated that fresh plaster be laid on every single day for that day's paintwork. This section of plaster is called a giornata, and the edges between giornate are still visible today. In fact, these visible section demarcations give a great idea of how the work progressed from day to day. While most fresco painters used a pre-made drawing of the day's work to stencil onto the plaster, therefore making the painting easier, Michelangelo painted directly on the fresco. This is perhaps the most impressive aspect of the fresco. Every day Michelangelo continued the back-breaking work under continuous pressure from the reigning Pope, Julius II. In addition to its beauty and majesty, the masterpiece has passed the test of time. Painted over 500 years ago, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel has survived remarkably well. All of the credit for this hardiness goes to Michelangelo, who was painstaking in his pursuit of perfection. If a section of plaster was not exactly to his standards, he would start over. He must have known that his work might last for centuries, and he wanted to make sure that it did. The quality of the plasterwork is germane to the longevity of the work. Paint can be restored through cleaning, but if the plaster fails, the work is lost. Only a very small section of the ceiling has failed. In 1797, there was an explosion at a nearby gunpowder depot, which caused a small section to chip away and fall to the ground. There was also some minor restoration work done on the ceiling in the late 20th century. Restoration experts meticulously removed layer upon layer of soot, grime, dirt, and other deposits. This made the fresco much brighter and more vibrant, and resulted in a fresco much closer in appearance to how it would have appeared at the time of its completion. Interestingly, the restoration also involved removing the fig leaves which covered Michelangelo's nudes. These fig leaves had been ordered in the 1560s by the very conservative Pope Pius IV. Despite its record of hardiness, there are concerns about the well-being of the ceiling moving forward. Millions of tourists visit the chapel every year, and this traffic has a degrading effect on the paint, as well as the structure of the chapel. While restoration on the paint can periodically be done, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to restore damaged plaster. While Michelangelo's work has stood the test of time so far, it is unclear how many more centuries his masterpiece will last.
Excellent! Now that we have read the passage, we have the necessary information to answer these yes, no, not given questions. To effectively and quickly answer these questions, you have to use a little bit of computer logic, meaning the if this, then that type of logic. Firstly, you should figure out whether the answer is given or not given. In order to do this, you need to ask yourself a question. Is this statement important for the passage? If the statement seems important for this passage of painting the Sistine Chapel, then most likely it's given. And now you just need to figure out whether the author agrees with the claim or not, whether it's true, false, yes or no. However, if you decide that the statement is not really fitting for this passage, or if it's way too much detail, it's not the kind of information you would include in a page and a half about the Sistine Chapel, then the information is not given. You just mark it as not given and move on. You have to be careful not to waste a lot of time trying to skim read for not given information. So let's do this now with these questions. Question number 36. Paint does not stick well to poor quality plaster work. All right. Is this question important for the passage of painting the Sistine Chapel? Well, at first glance, it might seem like it is, but if I think a little bit deeper, then I may realize that this level of detail is not important. It's too much detail. Perhaps if this passage were 10 pages long, we might have this kind of information. Otherwise, I would say that this is not so important and is not given. Therefore, I decide it's not given, mark NG in my answer key, and move on. Question number 37. Restoration results in the brightening of frescoes. Well, is this important for the passage of painting the Sistine Chapel? Knowing that the painting of the Sistine Chapel is a fresco that's 500 years old, I would imagine it's important to know whether or not this work can be restored and what it looks like after. So I decide that it's given. Now, I need to ask the next question. Does the author agree with this statement or not? Well, clearly and logically, when people restore the fresco, it will be brighter and more vibrant, as it states in the passage. So I mark yes confidently and move on to the next question. The fresco had been modified in the decades after its completion. Again, I ask the question, is this important for the painting of the Sistine Chapel? I think yes, because we need to know whether the painting had been changed or if it's the same as the original. So I decide that it's important for this passage, therefore it must be given. Now that I know it's given, I ask, does it agree with the claims of the writer? Well, hopefully, I was using some visualization to picture the information given in the text. If you did this, you will remember that there were some leaves covering the nudes that Michelangelo had painted. And indeed, these were modified decades after Michelangelo finished the painting. And again, they were modified centuries later during the restoration. So my answer is yes, and I move on to the next question. Number 39, proximity to humans has a negative effect on the ceiling. This question, again, I ask, is it important for the passage? And my answer is yes, because many tourists visit the Sistine Chapel, and it's important to know how this impacts the famous fresco on the ceiling. So it must be given. And then I ask, is this true or false? Does it agree with the author? Logically, yes. Humans, especially large tourist crowds, tend to slowly but surely damage the buildings they visit. So I mark yes and move on to the final question. Number 40. Plaster which has sustained damage is easily restored to its original, vibrant, and rich colors. Is it important to know for this passage, painting the Sistine Chapel, which is done on plaster, whether or not damaged plaster can be restored? Now again, here I visualize and I remember that interesting little piece about the explosion that happened at a nearby gunpowder depot which damaged the ceiling. So I know that this information is mentioned and it is important. So it must be given. Now, the question is it true or false? Can damaged plaster be restored, or can the painting on the plaster be restored? Logically, this is unlikely or nearly impossible. So here I indicate no confidently, and I wrap up my answers to this passage. Again, use this type of logic, practice it at home before your exam to do better for yes, no, not given, true, false, not given questions, and improve your band scores. Remember, first, identify whether it's given or not given. Then, identify whether it's yes, no, or true, false. Keep practicing, and you'll see the improvement too. To see over 100 hours of video lessons like this one, as well as 6 original practice exams and a fully interactive course for your phone, tablet, and PC, visit and join our premium package at aehelp.com. Also, download our app, Academic IELTS Help, and link the app to your web account for a world-class learning experience. Begin learning for IELTS success today.
Subscribe to our channel. Click over here. Watch more videos. Click right here. Or click our IELTS Hero for over 100 hours of complete video lessons and 6 original practice exams to help you pass IELTS.